Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, we're going to dive into the story of Huyen, a brave woman who has faced incredible hardships, raising her daughter Maya and building a peaceful life with Diep. But when her past comes back in the form of her spiteful mother-in-law, Mrs. Joah, will Huyen be able to protect her family and her happiness? Let's find out together. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss our upcoming videos. When Diep heard what happened, he didn't waste a second. He hopped on his motorbike and sped straight to Mrs. Joah's house, determined to confront her and protect the fragile peace between mother and daughter. But will a woman as cruel and stubborn as Mrs. Joah simply back down? Will Huyen have the courage to defend the small happiness she's fought so hard to regain? Will she truly be the safe harbor for her daughter amid new storms? This is The Door of Peace, a story of courage, love, and the strength born from the desire to protect. And before we dive in, I want to ask you, what would you do in Huyen's shoes? Should she forgive or stand firm to defend her happiness? Let's see how it unfolds. That afternoon, the sky seemed heavier than usual. The wind swept across the dirt road, stirring a red cloud of dust that made its way into Huyen's small yard. From the distance, a lone figure approached, walking with an upright posture, her face tight with tension, her gaze sharp enough to cut glass. It was Mrs. Joah, Tuc's mother. She returned to the house she once called her son's home, but now every step she took felt like an intrusion into someone else's life. Bibi, the little dog Huyen had raised since moving in, immediately sensed the danger. He barked furiously at the door, his fur bristling, teeth showing, as though he could smell the storm about to hit. Mrs. Joah scowled. "What kind of upbringing lets this insolent dog bark like that?" she shouted. Inside, Maya was playing with her wooden toys, completely unaware at first. But then she looked up, her eyes widening in fear. She recognized the face that had haunted her earliest memories. The woman who had yelled at her mother, who had thrown them out in the middle of a rainy night. Maya clutched her toy tightly and cried, "You can't come in, Mommy Huyen. There's a bad person in our house." Her sharp little voice made Mrs. Joah pause for a moment, but she quickly masked it with a crooked smile, forcing a gentle tone. "My granddaughter has grown so much. Why are you saying I'm bad? I only came to visit your mother, and you." Maya took a small step back, eyes wide and alert. Huyen didn't hesitate. She rushed outside, scooping her daughter into her arms. Her voice trembled, but carried determination. "Maya, come to Mommy. Let's go inside." "Yes," Maya whispered. And then Huyen's gaze locked onto the woman standing on her doorstep. There was no more fear in her eyes, only resolve and a faint trace of compassion. "What brings you here?" Mrs. Joah shrugged off her shawl, revealing a face hardened by anger. "What brings me here? Do you really ask? You think you're so good, so pure. Because of you, my son ended up in jail. You wanted to see him suffer, didn't you?" Huyen stayed silent for a moment, then answered calmly, her voice icy. "I didn't put anyone in jail, ma'am. He got himself there with his own choices." The woman's face twisted in rage. "If you hadn't filed that complaint, he wouldn't have been arrested. You were seeking revenge. You wanted to destroy our family." Huyen held Maya closer, her eyes blazing with barely contained anger. "Family? You call that a family?" she asked, her voice sharp but steady. A place where I was beaten, insulted in the night, and thrown out in the rain with my daughter. That's family to you?" Her voice faltered for just a second, but she regained control immediately. "If you'd said a single right word back then, maybe I would still have called it family today." A heavy silence fell. Only the wind whispered through the garden, rustling the green leaves and flowers. Mrs. Joah clasped her hands, voice trembling. It wasn't clear whether it was anger or shame, but she said, "He is still the girl's father. Don't you think of him?" Huyen glanced at Maya, then back at her. "Precisely because I think of my daughter, I had to act," she said slowly. "I don't want her to grow up with the same fear that destroyed me." Her voice softened, breaking just slightly. "You know, I stayed silent for years to avoid shaming your family. But silence doesn't protect anyone. It only teaches others that they can continue to hurt." Mrs. Joah's face went pale. "You dare call me bad?" Huyen's gaze never wavered. Her eyes were sharp, firm, piercing. "If you weren't bad, why did you stand by while your son hurt me? Why blame the victim just to protect your pride?" Those words struck at the last remnants of her pride. The pride of a woman who once believed she held all the power. Mrs. Joah trembled, her voice rising into a shriek. "You think you're better than me? A woman who left her husband has no right to speak to me like that." Huyen gently pressed Maya behind her, standing tall in front of the door. "Don't take another step. This house is no longer a place for humiliation or threats." The wind whipped fiercely, stirring the curtains behind Huyen. The dim evening light cast her in a new image. No longer the submissive woman who bowed her head, but a mother ready to defend her peace at any cost. A flicker of fear crossed Mrs. Joah's eyes. She no longer recognized the trembling daughter-in-law from years ago. Standing before her was a resolute woman, upright and unwavering, voice as strong as iron. Huyen spoke slowly, each word deliberate, heavy with authority. "I didn't tell Mr. Batch anything out of respect, but if I stay silent now, do you think he'll leave me alone? Or will you continue to destroy the life I'm rebuilding?" Mrs. Joah had no answer. Instead, she glimpsed Maya's wide, courageous eyes, so innocent, yet so full of bravery, just like Huyen's when she had once believed in love. She turned away, her voice still venomous. "Enjoy it while you can. Someday, you'll pay for all this." Huyen didn't respond. She simply hugged her daughter tighter, the tension in her chest slowly easing as the woman's footsteps faded away, mingling with the wind sweeping across the fields. Bibi barked once more as if to chase away the shadows. Maya looked up, whispering, "Mom, she'll come back." Huyen stroked her hair gently. "No, my love. No one will ever hurt us again." Outside, a light rain began to fall, but inside Huyen's heart, the storm had finally passed. For the first time in years, she felt a deep, quiet peace. That evening, Huyen sat by the window, her hand wrapped around a glass of cold water, still trembling slightly. The fear from earlier lingered in her chest, along with the old wounds that hadn't fully healed. She told Day everything, her voice cracking now and then, as if speaking the words aloud could somehow summon Mrs. Joah back to the door. "She didn't come to advise me like before," Huyen said softly, her eyes downcast. She screamed. Her gaze, it felt like it could devour us. Maya, still shivering, had hidden in the corner, her small body curled up, sobbing quietly. Dee's eyes darkened with a mixture of anger and resolve. Without a word, he stood, grabbed his keys, and moved toward the door. Huyen's heart leapt. "Where are you going?" she asked, panic threading her voice. "I'm going to talk to her," Dee replied firmly. "We can't let this continue." The engine roared to life, the motorbike kicking up dust along the dirt road. The evening wind cut at his face, cold and sharp, but inside, Dee's chest burned with a fire he couldn't quell. The memory of Maya running and crying, of Huyen's fear, pierced him like knives. If anyone dares to harm her, I won't let them get away with it. When he arrived, the gate to Mrs. Joah's house was wide open. The smell of tobacco hung heavy, and a television played idly in the background. In the courtyard, Mrs. Joah sat stiffly in a bamboo chair. Beside her was Mr. Batch, his face lined with age and fatigue. A cup of tea steamed gently in front of him, ashes falling onto the tiled floor. "You couldn't leave the girl alone," Mr. Batch said first, his voice strained. "Your behavior is a disgrace." Mrs. Joah lifted her gaze, eyes blazing. "Easy for you to say. If I don't do this, she might run away, disrespect me. I have to make her afraid. She needs to remember who's in charge here." Mr. Batch stood, trembling with frustration. "Do you think fear builds a family? The more you do this, the more you push people away." Mrs. Joah let out a bitter laugh, almost deranged. "So what if they run? Maya will come to live with me one day. When she grows up, she has to care for Took. After all, she's my granddaughter, my blood." At that exact moment, Dee's motorbike stopped at the gate. Mrs. Joah frowned sharply, and Mr. Batch turned to see who it was. Dust clinging to his clothes, Dee stepped forward, his eyes locked firmly on Mrs. Joah. "Mrs. Joah," he said, voice clear and unwavering, "what are you doing to Huyen? Do you know how scared Maya was today?" Mrs. Joah's eyes narrowed. "This is my house. Speak respectfully. You have no right to tell me how to behave." Day pressed his lips together, calm but firm. "I am speaking respectfully. You are crossing a line. If you continue to threaten or harass Huyen, I will involve the police. The law does not allow anyone to use their role as a mother-in-law to intimidate another person." A cold, sharp laugh ripped from Mrs. Joah's lips. "You dare? Huyen is still my daughter-in-law. I have the right to visit her. What have I done wrong?" "Visit?" Dee asked, eyes narrowing. "Calling it a visit when you yell at a child? When you make a little girl call you evil? That's not visiting. That's spreading fear." The courtyard fell silent. Mr. Batch looked at Dee with watery eyes. "You're right," he said weakly. "I've told her many times to stop, but she doesn't listen." Mrs. Joah slammed her fist on the table, voice shrill. "Everyone is against me. You blame me for the girl, and you—" She pointed at Dee. "Who are you to interfere in my family affairs?" Dee's gaze never faltered. "I'm someone who steps in when I see harm being done. I've seen how Huyen has suffered for years in this house. Do you know what your son did?" "Shut up!" Mrs. Joah shouted, red-faced with anger. "What do you know? He's her husband. Marital affairs are no one else's business. Because of people like you, women suffer." Dee's voice rose, breaking with indignation. "You hide behind family to justify wrongdoing, but family is no excuse for cruelty." Mr. Batch's hands shook as he gripped the edge of his chair, tears welling up. "Joah, you're being cruel," he said hoarsely. Mrs. Joah turned, tears shining, but pride unbroken. "I'm doing this for my son. I'm not wrong. Dee shook his head slowly, his voice firm, carrying finality. You are wrong. Blood is not strengthened by stepping on other people's tears. Without another word, Dee turned and left. Mr. Batch called after him, voice hoarse and trembling. Thank you. You're the only one who said what I didn't have the courage to say. Dee nodded. I only did what had to be done. I only ask that you keep her calm. If she harasses us again, I will file a complaint. Mr. Batch wiped his tears, nodding. I understand. I'll watch over her. As Day walked away, the bamboo curtain swayed with the evening wind. The sounds of creaking chairs, heavy sighs, and Mrs. Joah's angry sobs mixed into the quiet night, a jagged, broken kind of music. Later, Day returned to Huyen's little house. Bibi stood alert at the door. Maya ran to hug him, kneeling to stroke his head. Uncle Day, will that lady come back? She asked, her voice trembling. No, Maya, Dee whispered, holding her close. I promise, no one will ever scare you again. Huyen looked at him, gratitude shining in her eyes. I was so scared, but thanks to you, I don't feel that fear anymore. Day smiled, squeezing her hand. No one has the right to make you afraid. I'll be here, for you, for Maya, for this peace. Outside, the grapevine swayed gently in the breeze. A soft bamboo chime sounded, as if the world itself wanted to announce, this house will know peace. Yet, somewhere in the dark corners of the big house, Mrs. Joah still lingered. Her face flickered in dim light, wrinkled and full of resentment. In a voice thick with tears, she murmured, Do you think this is enough? Don't even think it. I haven't lost yet. But in Huyen's little home, the day had ended with a golden, melancholic glow. The puddles along the path reflected the setting sun, and from the kitchen, the smell of vegetable broth and freshly cooked rice filled the air. Huyen moved carefully, tending the fire, her heart lighter than it had been in years. When she heard the familiar hum of a motorbike stopping at the gate, her pulse quickened, a mix of relief and worry. Day entered, dust still clinging to his clothes, exhaustion etched on his face, yet a sparkle remained in his eyes. You went to see that woman. You weren't afraid? Huyen asked softly. She's unpredictable. I was worried something might happen to you. Dee smiled faintly. I didn't go to argue. I went to tell the truth. The past is behind us, but if she comes near us again, we'll involve the police. No one has the right to scare you or Maya anymore. Huyen let out a quiet sigh, tears welling. Not from fear, but from relief. Relief that someone had finally stood between her and years of torment. I think we should put in a new door, Day said, voice calm like a gentle evening breeze. A strong one, to protect the house and make Maya feel safe. Small things, that's what peace needs. Huyen nodded, her hand softening around the wooden spoon. Yes, and we'll plant a bougainvillea vine, so when Maya grows up, she'll only remember flowers and laughter, not fear or arguments. Silence returned, broken only by the crackle of the stove. Huyen moved in the kitchen. Day watched from the doorstep, feeling warmth he hadn't felt in years. Maya sat by the bed, notebook open to a math lesson. Uncle, can you show me this? She asked sweetly. I don't understand. Dee smiled and came closer. Okay, first you add, then subtract. See? Easy. Maya jumped up, laughter filling the house, blending with the wind, rustling the grapevine. Huyen smiled, a serene, rare smile, gratitude in her eyes. Day met her gaze silently. See? Peace doesn't need grand gestures. It only needs someone willing to care for the small things. Huyen nodded, voice warm and trembling. Thank you, Dee. For the first time in many years, the house smelled like happiness. The fire cast its soft glow on three faces. A man who had returned strength, a woman who had survived suffering, and a little girl discovering joy. Twilight faded, leaving only the chirping of crickets and the earthy scent of damp soil. Huyen finally understood. Real peace isn't silence forced by fear. It's knowing someone chooses to stand by you through every storm. That, she realized, is home. Huyen, a woman who has endured immense pain, finally begins to build a peaceful life with her daughter Maya and Dee. Just when it seems the storm has passed, her cruel mother-in-law, Mrs. Joah, reappears, bringing threats and fear. Maya is terrified, and Huyen must face the painful memories of her past while protecting her daughter. Dee steps in, confronting Mrs. Joah and defending the family's newfound peace. Through courage, love, and determination, Huyen and Dee fight to secure their home, teaching Maya the meaning of safety and trust. But even after this confrontation, a shadow still lingers. Will Mrs. Joah truly let go? Or will she return to challenge their peace once more? The answer might change everything Huyen has fought to rebuild.